Okay, sweet.
Oh, we made sure
Hold on.
it's got the
Yeah, we're in
good.
gallery mode.
Cool, cool, cool.
All right, where do we want to start this off with? Are you ready?
Sounds good to me. Sweet. Hold on one second. Okay, so the documentary had a bunch of Chinese. Were they Chinese or Asian or
Yes.
Japanese?
Say
They're
They're
Chinese.
Chinese.
all Chinese, yeah.
Okay, so they're Chinese. So it was about them trying to like incorporate their like working culture into like American factories, right? Because didn't they take over an American factory and like try to like kind of induce their own like business ways there and stop unionizing from happening and stuff like that?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but they also didn't try to follow safety regulations to an
Well,
extent. And then
wasn't there?
there was large cultural and linguistical differences between the workers, so um, they didn't learn super effectively. And
And
then their
weren't like,
pay was dog. Their pay was real bad.
yeah, weren't they working at like a glass factory too?
A
Yeah,
Yeah,
windshield. They were making
windshield
windshields,
factory.
I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
Interesting. So
Aluminum
wasn't
glass,
like
automotive glass.
the
Sorry.
main consensus from the Chinese company was to like cut costs and like get around corners like as much or as like semi-legally as possible to kind of like get around like the higher cost of labor in America. Because like I
Yeah,
don't know.
Well, towards the end, so at the beginning, they hired all these American employees. They couldn't keep up with the Chinese production rates.
Mm,
Um, and then towards the end of the documentary, they started automating pretty much every position within the factory, except for
mm,
probably a couple,
yeah.
um, to maintain production rates. So I guess lowered costs, but I don't know.
Well, that gets into like the dev or the inverse relationship between capital and labor when it comes to like the US and China. Like over in China, labor is like insanely cheap and like you can just kind of hire anybody. And like the culture over there is they work more than 40 hours a week and it's like kind of necessary. And like they have the whole like they like I'm pretty sure they only get like a week off a year, not even, and it's for Chinese New Year. And like that's not even a cultural norm. So it's like the attitude that they have over there around work is like completely different than in the US. And going along with that, second, talking about corporate social responsibility. Um, they basically like tried to stop workers from like kind of organizing and like being able to like make a living wage from this job, like at least as Americans. And it was definitely like an exploitation of like American young like factory workers who are trying to like make it out of poverty, which in my opinion like isn't the most fantastic. And it just kind of shows the difference between corporations in America versus corporations in China. Like it is interesting here that we do prioritize like the stockholder over the employee and the rest of what makes up companies in America. However, like over in China and stuff like that, it's more so completely around like profit and like driving up production rates as opposed to like giving worker rights and like expression in the workplace or anything like that.
Yeah, the
well, not a lot
culture
of it.
is
Sorry.
different because like Americans choose to do 5-day weeks and then weekends off, and then China will prioritize like 7 days a week, 6 days a week, like whatever the boss says. And then it's also like the difference in safety precautions, like in the documentary. it was just very seen that like Americans' workplace culture was safety, work-life balance, and just quality of life. And then China's work culture was just work, profit, efficiency. It was just kind of prioritize work for China and then prioritize life for like America.
One, I think quote or a quote that sums it up really nicely is the what's his name? The chairman said towards the end of the documentary, he said the point of living is work. And
Booyah.
that's yeah. And that was, I don't know, a little eye-opening, but also not really. I kind of expected a little bit more emphasis on work in China. But they had like a large collective need to represent China well in the United States. Like they had a board meeting with all the Chinese workers that immigrated to America to go, you represent America, you guys still need to, or you represent China, we're all Chinese, no matter what, even if you guys are becoming American, you are still Chinese. You need to represent the country as best as you can and work hard and do the best work possible. And it seems they all have like a responsibility to represent themselves, their company, and what they do for work the best.
I managed to find an article about how like inter-workplace communication is like basically of like utmost importance. And like it was this document on the people factor in global mergers and acquisitions. So like basically when large companies are like bought and sold to each other, the thing that's really dictating like how successful these companies are actually going to be when it comes to like, the marketing mix and like, like getting their distribution operation like going and like, just whatever they're trying to do. The communication factor and like how well employees and like certain teams and sects work together is the most important part. And since like not only were there ethical and cultural differences between the Chinese and the US laborers that they had at the factory, there were also linguistic differences, which made it impossible because like you're not going to, the American factory worker is already pulling from a certain demographic that's not going to take the time out of like, their day to learn a different language to communicate with their coworkers. And not many people in China speak fluent English well enough to like communicate in a proper manner. And that not only like disrupts or ended up disrupting their distribution programs and like their production rates, but it ended up like ruining the whole acquisition that they did down there in that factory.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty interesting.
And
Well, like
I just
they
like to
paid
support.
interpreters to be there,
Hmm.
So
but
I'd like
obviously,
to,
like they're only going to pay for those interpreters for so long before they see it as a waste of money. And then what are they going to do at that point?
yeah. Um,
Indeed.
the you could always move to technological. Like you could literally just have Google Translate or ChatGPT translate language to language. There's tons of translational apps,
Mhm.
but none of them do an adequate job, especially coming coming from two very, very different languages that aren't based in the same, I guess like what is it?
Syntax, I guess. Like there are
Yeah,
some
well, not
languages that
necessarily
don't
syntax, just
translate
like
well into each other. Like the
yeah,
way that you speak and the like the verbiage and like the sentence structure is completely different.
yeah. And not only that, like if you have machine learning do it or um, just general translations do it, it mistranslates super, super frequently.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking, I guess it could be relatively complicated speech in a warehouse because you have to maintain a high level of quality.
And I'm sure it's technical too because they're operating like heavy machinery as well.
That's so the reason. Well, towards the end of the documentary, they started automating all the workers,
Mhm.
and the reason that that stuff can be automated is because it's not highly technical work. It's on
Mm,
the job training. It's not
mm.
it like I'm not trying to bash it and say it's easy work or um, but it's not technically demanding. Like you don't need to go to trade school for 2 years to learn how to make glass. And those are the jobs that tend to get replaced and automated more often than the jobs that require a technical background.
Well,
Um,
I thought it was just more like mass factory workers. Like we had the
yeah,
like evolution of the production line with like Henry Ford and his business model. And then like basically everybody in every business after that was like, oh fuck, if we can make a machine do it, like let's make that happen. And like I don't know, like you did have to teach these guys for like a long time how to put together cars and like sit on a line and make sure everything was like looking right. But we figured out that we could make robots do it. So
yeah,
I don't know, but I do think that it like I do think that like to automate something, it also creates like technicalities within the job as well because you got to have somebody who like can fix it and knows how to operate the heavy machinery and like knows what's going to go wrong with it and stuff like that. So like not only do you have your capital costs, you have your capital maintenance cost and the technicality that comes with the capital maintenance, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. Um, I agree with you, but um, the reason they were able to automate the jobs is because the job doesn't require very it's automate it's
It's not very
able to
like
be done
super
by a robot.
intricate.
Yeah, it's not
Hmm.
very intricate, like it's not like plumbing or electrician or um, pretty much any trade. It's not welding. I mean, welding can be automated to some extent, but you can't weld where you need to weld.
Hmm.
And then I don't know. The company was just able to, put up large investment to automate, and then they have to maintain the automation. So what you were
Did
saying is
Fuyao
correct.
end up did Fuyao end up going bankrupt in America after that documentary?
No, I don't think so.
Well, did their American branch stay there?
Yeah, the actually, I kind of looked up a little bit because towards the end of the documentary, it said their wage their wages were $12.84 per hour, and then working at the GM factory is $29 an hour. And I assume GM had unions. They had to
Yeah.
work around unions.
Mhm.
Whereas Fuyao didn't. Um, and then more recently, according to ZipRecruiter,
Mhm.
um, they made a high wage of $35.71, a low wage of $12.37, which is lower than what they were making at the beginning of the documentary, if you're looking at low
Dang.
wage. But
And
the
the
current
documentary
range,
was made in 19.
yeah, the
Mhm.
current range is from $18.22 at the 25th percentile and between 20 or $18 and $23. And those are 25th percentile and 75th percentile. So it's
In
offering decent jobs. And then,
in 2024, they were raided by federal agents as part of an investigation into financial crimes and labor exploitation.
yeah, that's fair
Yeah.
too.
U.S. special agents raid Chinese firm.
That's crazy.
Ooh,
Yeah.
where's
Damn.
that?
Give me just a
That happened
second.
in 2024.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, which is funky.
That's crazy.
Hold on, I'm trying to read a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, federal prosecutors filed a civil forfeiture complaint naming assets seized during the July 2024 raid. Mm,
Oh, money laundering operation. That's fun.
well, that seems like what it is. Yeah, a sophisticated money laundering operation. These entities provided workers to local factories, primarily the Fuyao facility. According to the filing, these workers were legally undocumented or unauthorized to work in the U.S. Oh, so they were hiring illegal immigrants
Mhm.
and
Well,
then
not
taking their
even they were
money.
bringing them in. They're shipping them, not shipping them. They were
Damn.
integrating them not properly.
The groups
Yeah,
owned
because I
vehicles and family-style hotels, which they used to transport and house workers. Wow.
so they had it all covered. I mean, they got
Well,
the
yeah,
people in, they got the people housed,
that's
and no
what
one knew.
that's why there's so much like political angst around immigration and stuff because it's being abused by
Oh
companies to
yeah,
make
no,
money.
absolutely.
Ew.
How are you reading this on Dayton Daily News?
I'm reading this on glassbites.com.
Oh, there we go.
Hold on. Yeah, they seized the vehicles transporting the alleged illegal immigrants. They're filing civil petition right now. No criminal charges have been filed, apparently.
Yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
so apparently it's not Fuyao that's like under heat, it's the third party labor providers, but like Fuyao definitely knew what they were doing.
yeah.
That is actually hilarious. That's pretty funny. But yeah,
Uh,
since the working culture was so bad and they figure like, oh, we can't communicate with these people anyway, why not bring in more people who can't communicate and that you can like pay way less? That sounds like the perfect idea.
yeah.
Uh, hold on one second.
Well, it's not. Hmm,
They also like they just that company like Fuyao created like the shittiest worker experience like probably that those people will like ever go through. Because like you've got them like working their asses off like the people in America and like trying to work extra hours and stuff like that. And it's like not seen as like, oh, you're like trying very hard or like, oh, you're like it's just seen as like what you should be doing. So like the attitude towards they're like they're working and they're like I guess their brand equity, like their experience with the company definitely discouraged like others from working there and which is probably why they had the issue with third party labor because
yeah.
like I don't know how many people do you know who like if we had factory jobs back in the US would go work in the factories. Like not very many because it's kind of known to just be like a shit position or a shit job for not very much pay.
So I've worked in a factory scenario,
Mhm.
sort of, um, in like assembly lines and shit, and it wasn't that. Uh, I mean, it sucked. I worked there for a while, but you got to choose your own hours. I could work from any time. Like I could show up at 5 at night, work until 5 in the morning, and then leave.
Mhm.
As long as I got X amount of done by the end of the week or by the end of the day. Or um, and it wasn't terrible because we have workers' rights, and I knew I was getting paid to do it. Um, but in the cases where you can't, you aren't treated properly, you aren't treated
Mhm.
as human, or you're treated as subhuman human. That's when it would suck. Or
Yeah.
you're exploiting child labor, or you're exploiting in this. Well, I don't even want to say in this case, but in pretty much every manufacturing case of recent history, you're exploiting a third world country that you can pay your employees 5 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour.
Well,
Um,
just the nature of employment is exploitative. Like as a business, it is like
yeah,
not economically wise to hire an employee unless they're vastly outproducing what you're paying them. And
yeah.
that's just kind of how like business in general works. So like the moral nature of it is just kind of corrupt like that. But the problem is just like when it's taken like way too far. Like obviously there should be some form of like profit garnering, I guess, where they're like, taking a little bit from the whole that everybody's producing. But if you're like say like you're a factory worker and you're producing, let's say like $1,000 a day of like just like technical or material value like during your workday, and they're only paying you like, 50 to $100 for that day. That's a little exploitative, and that's where it gets to the point where these companies should kind of be held responsible to like take care of the employee rather than like, like stockholders and like the people who are like involved in the funding of the company. Because like that's why I think like the Fuyao plant didn't go so well like at first is because they created such a shitty experience for the Americans currently working there that they like, aren't gonna want to work as hard or like donate as much time to the brand and stuff like that.
Okay, can we pause for just a second? Sorry. Okay.
So the company faced accusations of interfering with unionization efforts and firing workers who supported unionizing. What do we think about that?
It's, I don't think it was okay they were let go because they wanted fair rights. But
I
also, unions are, they do good.
They also
Like
can be inherently like leech like
they,
because some unions will like take a certain percent of employee wages to support the union because they like need to pay people to do things for the union and negotiate wages and stuff like that. So in like some cases, the wages actually end up being worse than what they would have been without the union because the union garners so much off the top.
yeah.
Because unions
So,
are businesses too,
oh yeah, no,
funnily.
absolutely. Absolutely. I know that my union itself that I work for, because I heard Duncan saying, I work one for one. So my union itself, I know that all of our union reps in our buildings that we talk to,
Mhm.
they're all volunteers. They don't get
Really
paid. They don't
interesting.
get any extra money. They get nothing. It's all a volunteer thing.
Hmm.
Um, so I know for UPS itself, well, okay, my local, I kind of explained it yesterday, but when it comes to a union, you have your union reps in the buildings, and they all report to someone in a local. And those locals are all kind of based in different areas. So there's like a different local for Helena, and that's the one we're part of, is a Helena one. And then there's a Billings one, and then those two people will report to like say someone in the union who like does Montana itself. And then from Montana it'll turn into a region. So like the part of the region I'm in has Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and I think maybe Washington and Oregon. And I think that's our region. So they all have little people who like report up to them, and then it just gets bigger from there until you have the
Mhm.
one person who does talk to the CEO and does make the contracts. And obviously they, from what I understand of it, our contract is for the entire every UPS in the United States. So
Hmm.
all of our contracts the same.
Hmm.
I
Um,
think, oh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd be willing to bet that the union reps that are working for free as volunteers are specific to your building and specific to every building. Um, but when you get up to the like national levels and local
but yeah,
levels,
no, absolutely. They're
they
probably
yeah,
being paid.
they receive pay. Yeah.
We all have union dues.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
well, and once a month, I mean, I think it's $40 once a month taken out
Hmm.
of my paycheck for union dues. But part of that goes to my pension.
Hmm. Interesting.
So with the union, you work, they have a limit you work. So mine's like if I work over 5 years, when I finally retire in 40, 50 years, I'll get a paycheck from UPS And it kind of disperses with how much I worked when I did work there, if I worked over 5 years.
Hmm.
But the union dues, they go to the higher ups, it goes to, but I know like our union reps themselves that we deal with daily are
They're not getting
100%
paid.
volunteer. They don't get paid. They don't get any extra thing. And that kind of keeps it. So part of it is like you can grieve a supervisor if they do something they're not supposed to.
Mhm.
So like if they steal work from us, we're allowed
Mhm.
to grieve it, and what will happen is that we'll actually get money back. Um, because it's like they're taking money out of our pocket is how they kind of like phrase it. Um, but the thing is like depending on what kind of building you're in, a lot of that stuff gets away. Like I know my building itself, we all like our supervisors, and it's not like our supervisors are down there loading trucks for us. But every once in a while they'll help out. And the whole point of having like the volunteer union reps is so they're not sitting there pushing on you to grief your supervisors.
Mhm.
Because if because how it would probably work if they would get paid is they would get a very minimum like paycheck each week for doing it, but then they'd probably, I don't want to say like make commission off grievance checks,
Mhm.
but they would probably make something off grievance checks, which means then those grievance checks are getting pushed and like people are being pushed to make these grievances um so that these union reps can get more money. So
I was
but
also going to say, like, from the perspective of the company, like, unions do create, like, you've got, like, your increased costs, reduced flexibility, you've got difficulty with, like, managing performance for your different unionized workers, potential for, like, work strikes, and, like, all sorts of other things that going on, like, just people, like, getting together and being like, oh, like, we're not going to work, like, all that kind of deal. And the union also creates like kind of an adversarial relationship between like the employee and like the main head of the company, I guess, or like whoever's deciding their wages if they're not actively being like exploited. And not only does it do that, but it also kind of loses you your individual bargaining rights as an employee. Like let's per se you like are more qualified or you want to like move up quickly throughout like a unionized company, that's going to be damn
Or
near impossible with like without being
not
able to negotiate your
or
own like
do a better
necessarily.
performance
job.
salary and different stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Like, and obviously I have experience with one union. I've only worked in one union. Um, but we just had a preloader who was, I think the problem is when you think union, you think that like it's all the same. Everyone gets the same, we're treated the same. And that's not necessarily true. Um, we talked about it yesterday, but we just let someone go like 2, 3 months ago for time theft.
Mhm.
And this is where like a union is not the greatest thing because he just came back 2 weeks ago, same person, because he fought it with the union and the union helped him fight. So that's where the issue comes with the union is that the good people don't necessarily, they're rewarded.
They don't
Um,
reap the rewards of the union.
they don't really reap any of the rewards. The union's basically there to help the people who don't work, who call out, who uh just like in general don't do their jobs.
Mhm.
Um and but also part of the thing is so we just had someone else who was just actually promoted to as a supervisor. Um and she'll probably move up as she goes. But the biggest thing is that the unions also,
Yeah, see, like that would suck as a company. Like you get stuck with some shitty worker because like the union fought it, put him back in your like
we're trying,
workplace.
yeah, no, absolutely. We have a guy who's 65. He can't lift over 40 pounds. He has the temper of a 4-year-old,
Mhm.
and the problem is he plays by the book.
Mhm.
And the only way we can get him to get out is if he is throwing packages, and he only does that when supervisors aren't around. Now, mind you,
Mhm.
we have probably 20 preload employees, and we have currently three supervisors.
Damn.
And we all work in a warehouse and we all work down a line off a belt. So sometimes I don't always catch him. But
Mm.
we have also though, the one thing I will say is that the one thing they're super strict on is attendance. So like in our
50 days.
contract,
Yeah.
we're allowed to miss 4 days every 9 months before we start getting repercussions. And then they have a whole list of repercussions before we
Those are
get terminated.
repercussions.
Um, so you miss 4 days, so on your fifth day you get a verbal warning. This is your hey, heads up, you've called out too many times. And then the sixth day you get a written warning. And that's just you like on a piece of paper acknowledging that, yeah, I've called out this many times. On your seventh day, it is a 1 day suspension without pay. On your eighth day, eighth day, you get a 3 day suspension with no pay, and it's all in a row. And then on your ninth day, you are terminated. Um,
Interesting.
and it's in
That's
a rolling 9 months, yes. So, so like say you get your verbal warning on January 1st.
mhm.
And then in September on no, let's say in August 31st, you call it again, then your 9 months restarts all over again. And you start with a written warning, and you have to go another 9 months without calling out to get like no more call outs.
Damn.
So it's really there to, catch the shitty people, whatever. But part of the problem is that, well,
Well,
and the
that
other thing
ruins it
is,
for people with extenuating circumstances,
well,
and
and
people
that's
who
the
are
thing
busy
is,
or have
so
other things going
you
on.
call out 3 days in a row, that's one
Mhm.
occurrence. That only counts as one against you.
Oh, okay.
It does not count as a three. So say you're in the hospital for 2 weeks,
Hmm.
you call out every day that week, that's one occurrence.
Okay.
So you're not immediately let go. Um, and I mean, as a full-time college student working from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m.,
Hmm.
sometimes I just don't have the energy. And that happens. And I've talked to my supervisors, and my supervisor's super kind. They're very understanding. Like
Hmm.
they work with me when they need to. But also there's those supervisors out there who have been burned by a union before, where they got in trouble for something they probably didn't really do wrong,
Hmm.
other than probably make the wrong union member pissed, pissed off the
Hmm.
wrong union member, and then they got let go. Because it's definitely easier to fire a non-union member than it is to fire a union member. And that's
Indeed.
kind of where like the whole marketing in unions is like the whole like stigmatism against unions is it's all for one, we're all equal, we all get the same thing.
Hmm.
Um, but that's not necessarily true. So like, yes, we all get the same wage, all based off of our contracts. So because of when I started and a guy who started a year after me, we have two different wages
Hmm.
because of the difference
And you
between we
can't
start.
negotiate that.
Yeah. Oh,
Is there no like yearly reset that they do on that or no?
Mm-mm, not it
Wow. Really? So you're
depends
just
on the
kind of boned
contract we
with the
have that
wage that you get
year.
at first? Oh,
So we get a
interesting.
yearly raise.
Hmm.
But so when I first started in 22, I started at $24 an hour.
Hmm.
As a preloader, it's technically part-time. So any time I make after 5 hours is time and a half.
Hmm.
Um, that following year in August, so I was hired in December. So almost a year later in August, that's when our contract reset. Because when I started, we were actually in the middle of getting a new contract.
Hmm.
Um, that August, I got a $2.75 raise. Everyone in the building got that same raise. Everyone was making 24 at the hour because of when they started and all of that.
Hmm.
And then that following August, I got another 75% raise. So I went from 24 to 26.75, and now I'm at 27.50.
Mm,
And I'm still at that after 5 hours, I get time and a half.
mm,
Um, but with that being said, I have a guy who started literally maybe 9 months after I did,
mm.
missed the contract by a couple of weeks, and he started at 21 an hour, and he did not get the $2.75 raise. And he's still trying to figure out his whole like race thing because something got messed up with the new contract when he was hired.
Oh wow. So he's like missing out on like a few bucks from his
Not
wage.
necessarily. What I think they did is they gave him a raise and gave him a big raise, but was like, yeah, this is your raise for the next 5 years until we get a new contract.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if that's how it is for, because the guys after him, the
Hmm.
guy who was hired a couple months after him, also is in the same deal.
Hmm.
I know that because they talk a lot about like what was going on, because one of them's a very big shit stir and likes to shout his problems to the people we work with, and so I know a lot about what is going on there.
Hmm.
But so the three guys, so it's him and two other guys, they're all in the same boat. They all got this raise a couple months after they are hired, and then they're told they won't get another one until
For
like
five
next
years.
year or the year after or something like that. So, um, I don't think I will probably ever work for a union again. Part of it has to do with the fact that we keep people who don't do their jobs, and it's not the supervisor's faults.
Hmm.
It is 100% that the union, well, and the union can choose to fight for someone. They don't have to
Hmm.
fight for everybody, but they
Hmm.
go and they look
They
at
pick and
everything and
choose. They
they
have like
they
favorites and
make their
stuff.
decisions. Usually that decision is we fight for everybody.
Hmm.
So, but um which I mean it is what it is. I
I
don't think I would ever work for a union again though. Like I like the benefits and I like that we have a contract and I like that it's all set in stone for 5 years and it switches every 5 years. I personally can't work where I am working harder than somebody who gets to pick their vacations before me or gets to um, get a day off before I do.
Hmm.
Because the guy I was talking about who can't lift over 40 pounds, he was hired 3 months before I was. And he gets to pick his vacations before me, and he makes the same amount as me because of when I was hired. But it's kind of just this whole he does half the work I do, and I still don't get anything above him.
well, that's I wouldn't say that's necessarily a problem with the union. I think that's a problem with the way pay structures work. Because if you're making hourly, you're going to make a flat rate hourly across board until you prove otherwise that you deserve more. And in some cases, working for unions, you can lose some individual autonomy, bargaining for yourself, trying to get
And
yourself
it's
wages.
not so much that like it's the thing that they can't fire him. They can't let
Yeah,
him go because the union keeps fighting for him. And
Hmm.
yeah.
that's where it becomes an issue. It's like they know these people can't work here and they need to be let go, but they can't let them go because people are keep fighting for them. And that's like the biggest thing.
I think that's like union's whole thing though. It's like no matter what, their whole value is to fight for I guess like workers um just fight for workers. So like even if the worker's doing bad, it's like going against their whole thing. So it's like they have to fight for whoever's doing bad, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, but and again, it comes back to like you lose a little bit of your individuality because you could be working harder and they can't give you a raise because it goes against the contract.
Hmm.
You can't randomly get a day off because you have to go by seniority. Like you don't get any benefits for being a harder worker, which is kind of where unions also get their shitty names and why people are like, oh, well, like their unions just aren't good. And it's because like you have one bad worker and they continue together, and then other people start thinking, oh, well, why, if he gets to work the way he does, why should I be working harder
Hmm.
to help the company out when I'm not getting anything in return
Did
other than a paycheck?
Yeah, it makes you guys like all equal, almost like communism.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did anybody do research on unions outside of the United States? Like,
That's not really a thing. I mean, there are European unions, but they're like just as corrupt slash just as bad. I was looking into like French unions because like remember all the shit that was happening last year with like the farmers and stuff, and like the farmers unions
yeah,
freaking out and like dumping trash everywhere. So
yeah.
I was curious about that. And basically like they have like a fair little bit more power over there. Like they're
Mhm.
basically the deciders of like how much people get paid and like what the compensation is.
Yep.
And because they have so much power, it creates like a fair amount of problems when it comes to like these companies and like the governments making decisions that have to do with their wages. But it's because these employees have essentially like lost control of these like oversight organizations. Like these people aren't being paid on like how much they're producing or anything like that. They're being paid off of like subsidies and like whatever the union kind of decides that they get for their work. And that's why they were dumping shit in the streets and throwing trash everywhere. So they were really mad about that. But like, hold on,
Do
let
you
me.
do you think it'd be fair? Well, this is more of a wage question and less of like a globalized manufacturing question. But
Hmm.
do you think it would be fair to pay employees based off of output and less on their time? Because I, for at least in my case, I find it demeaning that my time is worth X amount of money. I
Hmm.
can't work in a place where my abilities aren't compensated properly. Like, so
Hmm.
I work at the shoe store and I get paid completely on commission. So if I don't hit my commission marks, I don't make money that day.
Hmm.
And then some days you exceed and you're like, oh, yes, I did a good job today.
Hmm.
Um, and despite the wages being inconsistently consistent,
Hmm.
it's more rewarding work.
Yeah, like you feel like you're actually doing it yourself. Like you're producing the value in that scenario. And like you're like, yeah, like I earned that today.
Yeah.
Well, and then unfortunately, not every job is like that, though.
Hmm.
Not every job can you can look and be like, oh, well, I did this. This is how much money I should get. Because part of that is on just last week, I had loaded over 1,000 packages in 3 different trucks.
Well, yeah,
Um,
so you are valued differently than like let's per se like another employee with your exact same job who's doing less than like a thousand
well,
more.
By
and
100
So
or
like
let's say
hypothetically, if there were like a pay system set up to where you were getting compensated for your actual value produced, would you not prefer that to like just other people getting paid the
part of
same to
it,
work less hard?
well, and that's the thing. There's like, yes, that would be good, except for like, it also comes back to how fast are we moving that day?
Mm,
And how many packages were in the actual like building that came through.
mm,
And another one that's coming to mind is like one of the biggest things at work is like you can't stop the belt. The belt has to keep going. Like legally,
mm,
they cannot tell us that we are not allowed to stop the belt. They just prefer
mm,
the belt to while we stay on, which is whatever. But that could also come back as a repercussion, like, oh well, how many times did the belt turn off? How many times like did we slow down? Because
mm.
my like yes, it'd be nice to get money off of each package, but also could you imagine how much shipping rates themselves would skyrocket just in order to afford that?
My
Well,
bag for my computer. I'm leaving.
Okay, grab it.
the it's probably not quantifiable at the moment, especially for particular jobs, some jobs. But if companies and workers are able to align their goals to achieve the same, like if they're able to align their goals to be the same, they tend to perform better. Um, like well, on a commission system, obviously the company wants to make money. I only get paid if I sell stuff. Therefore, I need the company to make money for me to make money.
Mhm.
So I am incentivized to do better work at my job, so I get paid more money. So my goals are also aligned with the company's goals. Whereas Alexis, your goal is working for UPS. I don't know them. Are probably not aligned with UPS's goals.
Well, the
Mhm.
other thing is I can't sell shipping. I can't
No,
make people use UPS and
no.
give them money. And that's kind of where like also like the whole thing comes in. Is like if because I used to be a server. I used to work at Olive Garden.
Mhm.
And that's like obviously not fully based off of commission, but with tips and stuff, you tend to work for your money the more with like people and all of that. And like you're supposed to upsell the appetizers and upsell the desserts because you get a certain thing with the company and all of that. But like with UPS, I can't upsell shipping. I can't sit there and
No.
be like, oh, you should go ship a 50-pound package 2-day air down to
In
Wyoming just because the company
Yeah,
needs money.
I don't want to make the confusion of sales or selling stuff
Hmm.
with company alignment. Um, like your goals moving packages are you don't want to move packages. No, it's hard work. It kind of sucks. You probably work with some cool people. Um, and UPS needs packages to get moved. So how are they going to do that? They're gonna pay you a fair, reasonable wage to do that job. To
Well, I
incentivize you to
think
move
that's
packages.
why wage is different for every job. Like, Alexis, you get paid what, 27.50, you said?
Yeah.
And so it's just different for everywhere. It's like she gets paid 27.50, but like I serve for $10 an hour, I think $10 an hour. And so it's like all depending on I think it all depends on like what the whole thing you're doing is. She's moving packages that she can't upsell.
No,
So it's like they've got to meet that requirement of, okay, since you can't really do the same thing of like upselling, but you're doing a hard thing, we'll up your wage. But then for like someone who's serving, it's like, okay, well, you'll make that in your tips. So we'll put your wage
so
down and you'll remake that, you know? I think it all depends on like,
that's
I think it all depends on just like what you're doing.
yeah.
Mhm.
There's one section of the documentary that I think is relevant. Is when they were I can't remember, but they were in the factory. They were making their glass, and the Chinese workers are like, they don't care about making glass. So the Chinese workers have an alignment with the company to make really good glass. The American
Mhm.
workers are here to receive a wage. So if you could
Yeah.
make your employees feel a need to make glass and absolutely love making glass, you'll retain employees better. They will probably be a little happier. Um, not to uh, there's a fine line between
Well, and that's why the shittier jobs tend to have a higher wage. No one wants to be doing jobs that nobody else wants to do. So in
Mhm.
order to incentivize someone to take this job that no one else wants to do, you're gonna pay a higher wage. And I was actually just thinking back on the whole like hourly wage versus like doing whatever. Um, you also got to think of like repercussions that could happen. Say you piss off the wrong supervisor, well, all of a sudden I'm going from loading 1,000 packages to loading 300, because not every truck has the same amount of packages.
Mhm.
Um, and that's like a big thing is like it just takes saying one wrong thing and all of a sudden your wages cut in half because you pissed the wrong person off. Um,
do you know what
Like kind of happens with any job though. Like you can be finagled by your supervisors kind of anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
well, and that's true, but like that's where also the union comes in is like um they can't just randomly give me a day off.
Mhm.
When it comes to day offs at like UPS's, They either go from seniority and ask down if anybody wants the day off. And if like you get down to the bottom of the list and say you wanted 5 people to take the day off and only 2 of them took it, then you
Hmm.
force layoffs from the bottom up.
Damn.
So uh like yes, there could be repercussions, and that's where I am thankful for a union, is that let my if I get a little angry and tell a supervisor to go away, I can't really, there's like they can write me up for it. Um, and they can try and like make my life worse, but I already have the hardest pull in the building. All they're
Hmm.
gonna do is give me an easier one, and I get to sit around for 8 hours and just talk.
Hmm.
So, and that's kind of where I am thankful for a union, because I can't just be let go for something random.
Hmm.
And it's definitely like a big thing for the union is job protection.
I'm feeling neutral on unions. They do provide job protection and like they're cool for some employees, but it definitely like Fuya was already pissed about like having to pay the Americans like legitimate wages. And then
Mhm.
then the Americans are like, these wages suck. We want to unionize. Like, give us a little bit more. If we, I was like, no way.
And then they
So,
all got a $2 raise anyways.
well, yeah. Well, that's far better than having to like deal with the union because the
Oh
overhead
shit.
costs that come from that are, I'm assuming are a lot higher.
Um, yeah, no, it's unions is a
Interesting subject for sure.
there's a lot that goes into it.
Unions
Um,
are what made American factory jobs what they are today. Like they've made
Mhm.
them somewhat appealing.
well, and I've
Like, oh, go
talked a
ahead.
lot about this with my fiance because his whole family actually works at UPS with me, and his grandpa used to work at UPS. Unions were good back in the day.
Mhm.
Unions they were created for a reason.
Mhm.
And now we have laws and all of this that stop half of what the union's kind of there to do.
Mhm.
Um, and so like now they're not needed, but a lot of like when you go and talk to someone who has worked in a union and has worked in a union in forever, like since say like they're 58 and they were 18 when they started in this union, they're only going to have good things to say, because when they were 18, a union was needed because they weren't being treated fairly. And now we're in 2025 and the world has changed. And like, I'm not saying unions aren't needed, but in all reality, they're not needed as much as they were.
Mhm.
Well, my biggest problem with unions is they're in the wrong. Well, okay, this is kind of coming out of my ass, but um, they are representing groups that are important, but they don't represent either enough groups or the right groups. Because manufacturing has changed drastically and the workforce is changing literally every single day. Like the fact that I am able to come to work, in quotations, work, and record a Zoom call with everybody here
Mhm.
tells like my bed is right here. I slept there, woke up, I don't know, however long ago, like an hour and a half ago. The workforce is changing. They're not necessarily protecting modern workers. They are
Mhm.
protecting aged workers, historical workers.
Mhm.
And not to say that those historical workers don't deserve protecting, but
Mhm.
as the workforce moves, the unions need to change incentives.
Well,
Indeed.
and a union can't just sit there, go and look at a company and be like, oh, we're going to put a union here. As we
Mhm.
saw in the video, it has to be voted for.
Yeah, it has
Someone
to be created
has
by
to
the
bring it to
workers.
the locals' attention. Be like, hey, we want to put a union up in this like factory, and it has to be approved through the local, and then it has to
Mhm.
be voted for in the company. And like supervisors, management, none of them get a say whether there's a union or not.
Mhm.
But it has to be voted between all of the workers on whether they want a union or not. And we saw like there was it was a 60-40 vote for in the video. So they didn't get a union. But we also saw
Mhm.
the steps they took. They went and spoke at a local. They went and they were like, vote yes. They had a what's the word? They had people standing on the side of the road that had vote yes signs, and then you saw that like management supervisors were putting up signs that said vote no. Do you like your independence? Like
Mhm.
it was like it, and
There's
that's the thing
competing
is like
ideologies.
yeah, and unions can't just come in and like swoop in. They have to
Mhm.
like be they have to be invited in. They have to be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, like come help us." Um, but also it comes back to like management has to say something about wages. And like in the video, a lot of the younger kids decided that they no longer wanted a union because it was possibly going to affect their wage.
Mhm.
So I think that's fair. Well, okay. Yeah, I think unions should focus on just broader groups of people.
Mhm.
Like the fact that I don't have a union, not I have a union at MSU, but the fact that I am here learning online, paying the same amount, receiving terrible education because my professor won't respond to my emails is dog shit. So if you listen to this, you should totally respond to my emails and meet with me in person. But like, come talk to me. Like we need, like everybody needs to have rights within any system,
Mhm.
and it's just a pain when they're not listened to properly.
Exactly. Precisely. We better include that. We have to.
Please, yeah, don't edit that out.
All
All
righty.
right, well,
Well,
on
does
that
anybody else
note,
have anything else to say? We all good?
yeah, I think we're
Yeah,
good. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Sweet. Same.
thank you.
So.